Hello and
Yeah,
namaste.
namaste.
I'm I'm Vinay Khanduri here presenting you this new episode of NBP Hot Seat. Today we have with us Mr. Padmakumar S Nair, former head of International Cooperation and Safeguards Division in NCPW of Department of Atomic Energy of India. In this in his outstanding career at DAE, Mr. Nair extensively worked on legal framework and nuclear liability issues and developed his expertise in this field. Today, we invite him to get his perspective on the civil nuclear liability and nuclear scale up in India. Mr. Nair, it's a pleasure to have you on this show. We welcome you and are excited to hear your thoughts on the topic. Mr. Nair.
Thank you, Mr. Vinay. I was fortunate to associate with NBP for quite a long time, as
Thank you
well
so
as
much, sir.
basically from the department point of view also. I have been in most of the discussions
Yeah.
on this civil nuclear liability issues right from beginning.
Yes.
So I'm more or less kind of clear about what is department's position and what is the
Yes.
apprehensions of the suppliers as well as the contractors also.
Wonderful, sir.
So
So, Mr. Nair, India's CLND, Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act was promulgated under the backdrop of historic civil nuclear deal between India and the US to basically involve India in the international nuclear trade. However, the provisions on the supplier side liability have put the entire exercise at the back burner. What is your take on CLND Act and its various provisions? Sir, over to you.
yeah, thank you, Mr. Vinay. See, as we have discussed, the CLND Act came into force on 11th November 2011, quite some time back.
Yeah.
And subsequent to notification of CLND rules, India had ratified the CSC on 4th February 2016. And upon ratification, there were certain declarations given by to the IAEA, which were kind of, we are completely in alliance or in an alignment with the supplementary compensation. Somehow some of the suppliers, some of the foreign, particularly the US as well as French, they're not very comfortable with certain provisions. That's why we are trying to, we have done a couple of exercises, like we have, during the various meetings, the frequently asked questions were also discussed with them.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's not perfectly,
Yes.
they're not taking it. So I was trying to find a way out how we can come out with this, the equations. So the civil nuclear lab, I can explain from the supplier's perspective. I think for the PXW, we can categorize the entire episode into two aspects. One is our Indian indigenous PHWRs, and the second one is the supplied reactors. So can we divide this into two groups and then try to address the concerns? I think that may be a better way of looking at it.
Yes, sir.
So there are many apprehensions raised by our Indian suppliers also when the CLND Act was initially, came into force. So most of the Indian suppliers were apprehensive. They were not in a position to supply. They were skeptical rather. So what has been done is for PHWs, this NPCL, Nuclear Power Corporation of India, has assumed the role of supplier. So some of those concerns were, though they are not completely, but still more or less it's kind of settled. Whereas the foreign suppliers, they still have some apprehensions regarding the suppliers issues as well as the maximum liability, other aspects, etc. Yeah.
So under the current regime, what are the practical ways by which Indian private players and then international supplier can participate in the Indian nuclear program without exposing their risk profile to something unknown that is not in their control?
Okay. Let me come to that point. Basically, the civil nuclear liability, the suppliers under the current regime, the civil liability of any supplier is capped to the contract value or the operator's liability, whichever is less as per the CLND rules. And it's not indefinite or infinite. See, most of the suppliers, the small time suppliers, the contract value, which is going to be less than 1500 crores, which is the operator's liability. So for the contractors, it's a small liability. But then there are ways of coming out. For NPCL projects, for PHWR supplies, since NPCL is taking the role of supplier, there is absolutely no concern for the supplier for supplies to the PHWRs. Now, in for any contract or supply to Indian PHWR, NPCLs assume the role of supplier, and hence both Indian as well as foreign suppliers are relieved the liability burden. This is mentioned in the tender document. Actually, in most of the NPCL tender document, this GCC, this is clearly mentioned. If a supplier is still skeptical about liability burden, then there is an option. We have an INIP, Indian Nuclear Insurance Pool, to even take the supplier's insurance policy at a very nominal premium. Actually, this needs to be discussed with the INIP operators, but the INIP operators offer suppliers policy as well. So they have both the operators policy and the suppliers policy. The suppliers policy will take care of the concerns of the supplier. Now, the interesting part is once the operator takes the insurance, actually they are taking very regularly. Once the operator takes the insurance, the right of recourse is legally subrogated to the insurance agency. So, and hence it's not the operator or the NPC is not going to be suing the supplier, but it's the insurance agency. If at all somebody has to sue, they're going to do it. Now, if you're already taking a insurance from the INIP or the insurance agency, there is no question of creating a problem for the supplier.
Yeah.
So this is one aspect which I have to make it very clear. Second point is
okay. Yeah, please go ahead.
The second point is the Article 46 is only to the operator, and that has been very clearly mentioned in most of the parliamentary discussions and the standing committee also. So this parliamentary committee very clearly says that this is only for the operator and that's not for the supplier. See, these are the typical apprehensions raised by the suppliers. One is the liability cap, the time period. Time period is another issue. The time period is basically the initial licensing period.
Yes, I was coming to that point actually. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Regarding time period, so once plant is operationalized, right? So it has right. Before criticality, one has to go for obtaining operators liability. So I think suppliers have also to follow the same practice.
Suppliers have two options. One is if for NPCL plants, absolutely there is no issue as such. So far as what I understand, even this has been cleared from the highest committee. So I don't think there is an issue for the suppliers so far as PHWR is concerned. Yeah. But yes, the time period is initial licensing period for typical of our plants is 5 years. And our Atomic Energy Regulatory Board gives a license for 5 years. So there is some time gap, say for example 5 to 7 years. That's because many times after the fuel loading, there could be a time gap of 1 or 2 years for attaining the full power. That's why it's slightly maybe of the order of 5 to 6 years is a maximum time period for which the liability has to be maintained by the supplier.
Yes. So this is the time period for which any supplier has, if they are opting for availing this insurance policy. So they will kind of they will have to make a premium payment till 7 years or 8 years, something like. So this is limited. So from time point of view, this is limited, and then from liability point of view, in terms of monetary value, this is again limited, right? This is not unlimited.
It's not unlimited. It's basically the contract value, which is for most of the cases that's going to be the contract value, because I don't think any for the small suppliers 1500 crores is a big amount. I don't think except for huge contracts.
Yes, absolutely.
And the second point is
then sir, for operators for operators, will it remain till the lifetime of power plant, or again for operators policy this is again limited in terms of time?
No, operators policy is perpetual. You need to see from the right the day the fuel is loaded till completely the system is decommissioned. Operator has to maintain the policy, so that it's a good backup for the supplier, so that the operator's policy is always there.
Okay, so from this, that's very interesting point you have you have brought in. So of late, India is now looking to involve private players in the nuclear power
Yes,
utility business, and most probably
right.
within the existing legal framework, right? So we assume that for time being, the legal setup is going to remain same. So
Yes,
what are the different options and business models for them to participate in the nuclear utility business under the current legal
yeah.
setup?
This is an interesting aspect because currently the Atomic Energy Act does not allow the private entities to own a nuclear power plant or operate a nuclear power plant.
Yeah,
It can only be a government entity or a corporation like NPCL or any other corporation which is under government.
yeah,
They are allowed to operate or even own a nuclear power plant. So there are some talks which is already going on in the government sector, government side, to kind of amend the act so that the private participation can also be allowed.
yeah.
So I'm not sure what is the current position, but this is already it has been flagged to the highest authority, and they're looking into it.
Okay, so currently, if we see, the kind, if something works out, between the
All right.
between DAE and the private players whom they
Yes.
are having discussion with. So, if it works out, so currently we see that operator and owners are a single entity, that is NPCL. So when is
Yes. Yes. Correct.
so if any such new model emerge with the infusion of private sector investment in nuclear, the private investor will assume the role of owner, but then NPCL is
Yes.
going to remain new operator, based on certain discussions that are going on
Yes.
in
That's
the
correct. Yes.
in the
Correct.
industry. So in this scenario,
Yes.
how will the operator's liability be governed and channelized?
It's an interesting aspect. Now, see that currently NPCL is taking the role of supplier even for all the PHWs. Now, once there is a private supplier or a joint venture is coming into effect,
Yeah,
then practically the assumption of supplier by NPCL, I don't know how far they can support this kind of an idea.
yeah,
But there can see for PSWR, definitely NPCL is kind of an authority. They have to it's again a government policy. If government wants the NPCL to take the role of supplier, it should be possible. Anyway,
okay,
it's finally an NPCL call. I wouldn't like to comment because NPCL they
I
have
got
their
it.
own management decisions to yeah.
Okay. So this will be NPCL's decision also. So no legal
Yes.
amendment kind of things are required for this to take
Once
it
the
forward.
yeah, that's correct. Once there is an amendment in Atomic Energy Act to allow private participation, then there is no issue. It's only basically the NPCL's call how to handle it.
Wonderful, sir. Wonderful. And sir, then for small modular and micro reactor, what will be the
Yeah.
governance mechanism to enforce legal framework and liability regime? If you can throw some light on
This
that.
is yeah, yes. This is very interesting. Nowadays, there are a lot of talks regarding this micro and modular reactors, SMRs. But from the liability point of view, this might. But of course, see if you see the text of Nuclear Liability Act, any thermal reactor which produces 10 megawatt thermal or more, 10 megawatt thermal or more
Okay,
is
okay,
categorized within the 1500 crores liability bracket.
okay, okay.
Now, the issue is 10 megawatt thermal is a very small
Yes,
power when compared. See, for example, even if you can think of a small, very small micro reactor,
yes, yes.
uh, let us assume a 10 megawatt thermal can only produce something like, of the order of 3 megawatt electrical. But
Absolutely.
3 megawatt electrical looks like it's a very small micro
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing, which I'm not sure whether it's viable economically and
Yes,
technically. No, but if you are going for a 10 megawatt thermal, which is typically the thought of a reactor when it comes to micro kind of stuff, then 10 megawatt thermal electrical will definitely call for this 1500 crore liability. Now, if you there is an interesting aspect. Now, currently, this INIP or insurance agency is only they are only ready to take up reactors under NPCL's fund. So this is again basically a call by the insurance agency whether how to rope in or how to raise their funds, how to have so many reactors which is going to come to the
okay.
grid. Yeah, that's the issue.
Wonderful, sir.
But
Wonderful.
I hope the INIP can handle micro-reactors and modular reactors. But anyway, it's a call which the insurance agency, because it's a big business for them also, because they're going
Yeah,
to generate a lot of
of
money.
course.
Yes.
Okay, so sir, that's very insightful. What would you like to propose to make nuclear policy more acceptable and receptive at the suppliers and operators level, and also the one that can broaden and the
Yeah.
cooperation between India and other countries? Because so far we don't see much
Yes.
growth happening,
Yeah.
at this front.
There is no great breakthrough. That's correct. So, see, operators' considerations are already addressed or settled by NPCA. For private participants, DAE may have to formulate a strategy to handle participation issues by appropriately amending the Atomic Energy Act, as well as bringing certain legal backup for the FAQs on CLND Act. Now, the FAQs of CLND Act, it remains an FAQ. If the government can slightly reinforce this with some kind of a notification saying that the FAQs are legally
Yes,
binding on the act, something like
correct.
that. That's one way out. Second,
Maybe a
yeah,
presidential order kind of thing can be, can be thought of,
there are
to
there are
give it a
there are
legal,
yeah,
to give a legal status to FAQs.
there are legal mechanisms to do that, but then the question is how the administration or the policymakers
Yeah.
wants to handle it. But this is already known. Most of the top management is known. They're aware of this issue. Probably, I hope they may come out with some options. But I feel this, at least the supplier's definition may need little tweaking, kind of a, at least, see, this, the supplier's definition is clearly mentioned in the rules. It's not in the act. So this rules, if there is a possibility of to slightly amend and slightly tweak the definition, make it more clear that the main, if you see this Dr. R.B. Grover's paper, as well as most of our department stand is that the main supplier is the supplier who is going to sign the contract with NPCL for the project. But unfortunately, for the main, for example, for EDF or for Westinghouse, they feel that they have a lot of subcontractors which they are reading this act and rules and definitions independently, and
Yes, yes.
they're having concerns. This is a precise issue. So if somehow if you can say that the subcontractors are out of the bracket and the main contract is only going to handle the liability, then probably the problem may get solved.
It makes sense, sir. It makes a lot of sense.
Yes,
So now, before we wrap up, what is your final words
correct.
for the audience and all stakeholders?
Yes, it's very interesting. The current civil legal liability regime in India is adequate to address all concerns of local suppliers or PHWRs. There is absolutely it's all taken care. Even for foreign suppliers, for PHWRs they can still supply because the NPCL takes the responsibility. The only concern for them is most of the reactors need to be under safeguards, which I hope by force it's going to be there because we have to have fuel for the in a large scale for the upcoming PSWs. So that issue is taken care. Now the only issue is that for the international projects, yes, the main concern is for the foreign suppliers. Dr. Grover's article, as well as the Indian side, considers that there is only one supplier who is the main stakeholder. For example, I'm giving a
Okay.
specific example. For example, for Westinghouse for US supplied reactors, EDF for French supplied reactors, and Rosatom for Russian supplied reactors. So this main contract is, for example, or Westinghouse or EDF or Rosatom, they are going to be considered a supplier because they are going to sign that contract. The
Okay.
main contract is as well as a multiple chain of partners and not, but unfortunately the subcontract of these main companies are not in a position to accept this kind of the argument, and that's why we have a stalemate. So probably if by means of a small amendment in the rules, I mean, it's my personal opinion is that this could be worked out. Now, as
It,
revisit to CLND Act in its certain provisions as well as definitions of suppliers, as mentioned, may be beneficial or worth considering to fast track these projects, which have suffered since long. See, these both parties, like the Indian side as well as the foreign side, both are suffering in terms of time, opportunity, as well as the project viability, because there are renewables coming up, so we
yeah,
can't afford to lose time.
absolutely,
So
sir.
this Next point is this net zero initiatives committed by India is an excellent opportunity to fast
Yes,
track these nuclear projects. It's
absolutely.
a unique opportunity to complete the DIA's future commitments.
Makes sense, sir.
So
Makes sense.
coming yes, and coming back to the SMRs, which is the talk of the town currently.
Yeah.
But we need to parley. It's an excellent opportunity because it's a good viable in terms of small modular reactor. The only issue is that if the insurance or the liability part, if it is taken care by the insurance agencies, I think that it stands an excellent possibility.
Yes.
But if you are waiting, then the renewables may be giving a tough competition in terms of project cost, energy cost, as well as
Absolutely.
execution times.
But yeah, and then renewables have also to be supported, by some robust firm power
That's correct.
base load source, right? Otherwise,
Yes, yes.
renewable themselves cannot grow. And so far,
That's correct.
we have a well established, well installed coal power plants. But then in the future,
Yeah.
they need to be phased down if we are serious about
Yes.
climate change mitigation. So
Right.
we need to prepare, some alternative clean source base load capacity, and of course
Nuclear definitely.
nuclear is a very good option.
Yes. Nuclear definitely as a base load, there is absolutely no kind of confusion in this aspect because this
Yes,
is only stable and 24/7 power supplies. So we
absolutely,
need
sir.
to encourage this opportunity and see. Let's see how we can make it.
Yes, yeah, and you made a very good point regarding having a that designating a single major supplier rather than involving all the component level equipment suppliers and component and subcomponent level suppliers, because
Right.
eventually enforceability of the act will be questionable, is questionable, of course, because how can you enforce such kind of rule when
Right.
practically it has to be applied. It will be applied in
Right.
future if something of those sort happen, right? So enforceability is definitely under question.
That's
So
correct.
sir, thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank you,
your
sir.
viewpoint and your key insight on the topic. So Mr. Nair,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much for your for this enriching discussion and for taking out your time uh, for this interview.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
viewers, with this, we are winding up this discussion. For any questions or queries, please let us know.
Okay.
And also stay tuned for the upcoming fifth edition of Annual India Nuclear Conference INBP 2024, which is scheduled to be held on 19th and 20th November later this year in Mumbai. So, with this,
Thank you, Vinay.
thank you so much,
Thank you so
sir.
much, Vinay.
Thank you so much. With this, we are winding up. Bye bye. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye.